Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, and for almost a decade, I have been a transformation coach and therapist. This podcast is all about lifting the veil of consciousness and awakening to the truth. It is also about helping you to raise the bar in all areas of your life and relationships by starting with you. If you're ready to take back your personal power and reclaim your life, you have come to the right place.
So this
I'm
episode
so glad
might
that
be
you're
a
here.
bit of a tough pill to
let's get
swallow,
started
and
with
I
today's
sat with,
episode.
Should I put this out there? Is it going to serve anyone? I decided to go with it because when I reflect on my own journey with toxic relationships, this is for me as much as it is for you if you're meant to hear this. And if it resonates, I'm really here to tell it to you straight. There's no sugarcoating it. I don't really like to fall into the narrative of that we have no part to play in the situations that we put ourselves in as an adult, that we have to be able to take ownership, to see someone else's behavior and part in it clearly, not take ownership for their part, but ownership of our own traits and tendencies that get us stuck and trapped in these toxic situations. So the women that I work with who have done ETC, who have worked with me privately, they start to have these awarenesses. And it's very empowering, whether they're still in the relationship or they're exiting. They're having these light bulb moments, these sparks of insight, and they're changing the way that they're doing things. And they're starting to see how they got themselves into the situation. It's almost like reverse engineering. How did I get myself here? I think this is the most important work we can do because we can stay stuck in the blame game. And then guess what? You leave that relationship, you're going to end up in the same situation or something very similar, unless you can see, oh, what are the behavior traits that I have that are unhealthy that made this become something that I was trapped in? And this is not easy to do. You might not be at your stage of the healing journey to be able to look at this because of all the shitty things that they've done and are doing in their behavior. I get it. And again, it's not taking responsibility for their behavior. It's taking responsibility for our role in co-creating the dynamic, because you better believe we have a role to play. So many of us get stuck in these toxic and narcissistic abusive relationships because we got hooked into the intensity and love bombing early in. There's a part of us that really just was addicted and hooked into that intensity. There was a part of us that knew something wasn't right with the intensity and how quickly things moved and how odd some things felt in the beginning that felt just too good to be true, that things were just very over the top. But we ignored that part of ourselves. Not all of these men love bomb, but typically there is things that are happening that just feel really like over the top. You're not ready for. It feels like your boundaries are constantly being violated for what it is that you're comfortable with and not comfortable with, and you're not setting those boundaries or standing in them or asserting them or even upholding them with consequences. So because we have this mindset around I was hooked in by the love bombing, I was fooled, we use this as a reason for why it's not our fault, why we're victims. And this isn't about fault, and it's not about blame. It's about we need to look and go, what was my role in this so I don't do this again? What was my role in getting into this situation so that I can do my best to avoid it moving forward should I end up in a different relationship? And many women will say things like, this isn't how they presented themselves to be in the beginning, right? So I was fooled, I was tricked. And it can feel that way. It certainly can feel that way. But it's not an empowering way to look at it. It can be really difficult. And when you have those feelings, it can be really hard to take ownership for the role you played in getting into the situation in the first place. So we have to realize, while you're never responsible for abusive, manipulative behavior, violence of any kind, you have no role to play in abusive behavior being directed at you. We have to realize the part that we played. So we allowed the bad behavior to escalate. We saw patterns of bad behavior and we allowed it to continue, or something happened that was a cross of our boundary and we maybe asserted it and it kept happening over and over and over again. There was something within us that made that okay. We gave too many chances. So when you're seeing abusive and hurtful behavior, having the conversation 5, 10, 15, 20, over 20 years, I mean, it can go that extreme. And you keep giving more and more and more chances because they promise to change and they promise that they've got it, only to be right back in the same behaviors once again. We give too many chances. We've crossed our own boundaries. So there's certain things that your boundary, you have a certain boundary, you might even be aware of the boundaries, but we crossed our own boundaries into doing things that maybe didn't feel right, or that we knew we didn't really want to do, but we said yes anyways. And that's not to say sometimes in relationships you don't say yes to things you don't necessarily want to do sometimes to please the other. If it's things that are just really benign, like something like what restaurant you want, or like things like that, it can start there for a lot of us to learn to speak up just about what food we want to eat. But it can start with those kind of things. And also in some healthier relationships, you can kind of just go, I don't really care about the restaurant, but I do care where we go on a vacation, or I care about where we stay when we go to this place, or, there might be other things that you do care about. So it is knowing what those are and knowing when you do need to say no, if it's compromising your boundaries and values and your needs and wants. Another thing that happens is that we give up who we are, or maybe we never even discovered that in the first place. So it might be that we try to bend and twist into being something that we think someone else wants us to be. And that is a trait that can get us into trouble if we're not solid in who we are and we're trying too hard to people please and be what the other person wants. Again, there's some of this that goes on in a healthier relationship where it's like, you like me to wear my hair this certain way, I'll wear it like this more often if I like it too. I have to like it also, right? I'm not going to go shave my head because someone might think I'd look good bald, or if a partner did. But, there's things in there. So there's always nuances and there's always context in here. But these are just things to think about. So we have to look at where we gave up who we are as individuals. But then we also have to look at our decisions that we made, micro decisions, maybe unconscious decisions, maybe nonverbal decisions, like what contract did you sign verbally or non-verbally or on paper or not, very early in the relationship where that contract has continued. So it's like when you got into the relationship, where were you at? What was the context? What was that unconscious contract you signed? I need you to take care of me. I need you to rescue me. I can't do this by myself. I need someone to take care of me and help me. And then you end up attracting someone that potentially is successful, has money, wants it, is going to take care of you as the hook. And then you're in a relationship where you are dependent and you have a pile of kids and finances and all these responsibilities. Now you're hooked. Now things are really complicated and really difficult to leave. So how you start the relationship is often how it continues, and often is a big reason why it ends, ironically. So important to see patterns, but we have to be able to see where we made decisions. So we decide to have kids or put ourselves in a position where we could become pregnant as women. That's a large part, our job to protect ourselves from that, right? There's ways to do that, many ways. But we made the choice, right? We make the choice to have kids. We make the choice to invest in buying a home or buying property or investing in things. We decide to quit our job or become a stay-at-home mom, and that becomes our focus. So that puts us in more of a dependent situation. We have to see our own role and our own choices that co-created the situation. And this is how we can reverse engineer it should we end up dating or in a new relationship on the other side, is how do I not make those same mistakes again? What were the things that got me into that now I can make sure I'm not doing this time around? That's the work. Doesn't mean you're going to avoid everything 100%, but you're going to have a lot more chances of spotting something that's really toxic before you get yourself entangled in ways that you can't easily get out of. So one of the ways that I believe we can really spot early on, or fairly early on, if we're in an actual toxic, possible narcissistic relationship with someone that doesn't have our best interest at heart. And what I've identified is this: it's the sudden switch, or there's a point along the way where something really drastically changes. It might happen slowly, but when you look back, you're able to look at it and go, yeah, it's happened slowly, but now I'm like dealing with someone that's totally different, where all of the extra attention and attentiveness and all of that just goes away and is replaced with other negative patterns, right? So when it goes from too good to be true perfection to watching all of that love bombing slowly disappear is part of that sudden switch. Now, this can be hard because in many relationships, they start off intense with lots of different efforts being made on both ends. But generally, there should be some consistency there. When there is love bombing, which is true love bombing, which is part of manipulation, when you see that return only after a huge fight or an abuse incident, that is another big tip-off. When you're only seeing it happening, the right things being said, the right behaviors, more energy put in, more effort temporarily made, but only after a negative incident, abuse incident, or you're threatening to leave the relationship, that's when you know that it's love bombing, for one, because that shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be the big blowouts and ruptures anyways consistently happening. And then there shouldn't need to be a whole bunch of shit poured on you to try and keep you in the relationship, right? To make up for that. So it's those highs and lows and those extremes that point toward more of a toxic situation that creates that traumatic bonding, because you are simultaneously experiencing abusive behavior, and then the love bombing nice stuff gets thrown back on top to help to make you focus less on what had happened, to manipulate you back in. That's what started in the beginning. So then you go back into that mentality of, oh, here we are. Maybe now he finally gets it, and now I'm going to get back what we had in the beginning. But it doesn't last. There's parts of you that are like, oh, I wish it could be like this forever. Like if you could just be like this all the time, everything would be lovely. And you fall into this trap of just almost sadness because you're like, he obviously knows what to do to treat me well, but he's doing it on purpose, not doing it. And when it's happening and you're getting the love and the attention and the validation and the connection or perceived connection that you want, it feels so good, and you're trying to do everything you can to make it so that it doesn't go away again. So then you lose yourself and you start doing everything you can to try to control the situation. So as soon as you start to see yourself trying to change them back to who they were in the beginning of the relationship, you can be pretty sure that something not so clear, not so pure was going on in the beginning. Again, yes, it's normal for the honeymoon phase and all that, but the honeymoon phase isn't like intoxicatingly overwhelming, right? It feels good. Everybody feels good. Everybody wants to spend lots of time together. It feels new. It feels exciting and all that. And over time, some of that intensity does fade over time. But you shouldn't be feeling like everything has drastically changed to where it's like, where did that person even go? That's a big tip off. So the good guy that you thought you got in a relationship with is slowly, or it could be, some women say almost overnight, replaced by someone who consistently displays indifference, negativity, a drop in effort and care, nasty behavior, gaslighting, stonewalling, blame shifting, ugly fights, and crazy making communication. So you're experiencing more of that. And there's also part of you that's like, where's that other guy? Like, he's in there somewhere. You're trying to figure out and crack the code. We have to remember that ugly side, that really dysfunctional, toxic, abusive side, was there all along. It was not triggered because of you. It's not just you that has experienced this. And the good guy act was not their authentic self from the beginning. Otherwise, that behavior would be consistent and unwavering in the relationship because it's their true nature. It's who they are. So if they came into the relationship as fairly attentive and responsive to you and wanting to communicate and have discussions and have connection and prioritize the relationship and spend as much possible time together connecting that you're able, and then suddenly they're not coming around, or they're not communicating, or they're leaving you on red for hours at a time, all the time. This is a consistent pattern. You're not able to have conversations anymore, or the conversations turn into these crazy making arguments that go nowhere. Those are all really big tip-offs. So what is the best protection to avoid this in the future? So some of you might be at the very tail end of your situation. Some of you are done with it and you're dating, or you're in a fairly new relationship. I know there's women in all camps here. So the best protection to avoid this in the future is everything I just talked about here. It is doing that inner work to know your core values, to know what you want and need, what you will not tolerate, the traits that brought you into these patterns and how far back they actually go, and changing yourself, because we're going to attract at the same level that we are, right? Emotionally, mentally, energetically. So that's why we need to clean up our stuff to have a clearer focus on what is it that I want? What do I want to feel? Well, if I'm in a relationship, why? Like, what am I getting from it? What do I have to give? And what are the benefits? Like, really getting clear. How do I want to feel in a new relationship? Right? So wherever you're at, some of the things to look at, and as I said, there's no perfection. There's no way to avoid altogether getting into another potentially toxic situation. But with these points in mind, you're going to have a much better chance of not getting too far into something before you start to see those toxic behavior patterns starting. While we're talking about the inner work that you need to be focusing on, I want to let you know that End the Cycle Evolve, my coaching program, is now available in a self-study, self-paced format. You can get the details and register to get started today at Leanneoten.com/evolve. Back to the episode. Take it slow in entering any new relationship. Of course, these are all for you if you have already left. Taking it slow really just means that it takes time to see patterns, not months, but like months and months and months. I think it takes a good year or more to really start to see patterns that could become problematic. This is where you're addressing them, obviously, as they're coming up, and watching for changed behavior and overall things smoothing out and becoming better and better, not worse and worse. That's a very big one, because typically when you are getting into something unhealthy, it declines and gets worse over time, not better. So taking it slow helps you to see those patterns. This also means not jumping into moving in together within the first year or two, at the very least. This is no lending money and getting into financial entanglements and commitments that will impact you negatively, or make it difficult or impossible for you to get out and make a swift exit. No making big decisions that you can't easily walk away from. That list could be many, of course. And it is having your boundaries and your needs and your core values and your non-negotiables, like the absolutes, very clearly defined. You have your nice haves. Would be nice if he had this look, or he looked like this, or had this color hair, or was this height, or had this much money, or owned this, that, or the other. Those are it would be nice, but they're not your non-negotiables. They're not your boundaries. They're not your deal breakers, and they're not your core needs that you need to have met by a partner, specifically in a relationship. So we need to dive into all of these pieces. This is what we're going into in depth in my new program. I'm running the beta round right now with a small group of women to really perfect it and figure out what I need to cover with this group of women. What are they most struggling with in that first year after leaving? and we're going into this. If you want to get into the next round, you can get on the waitlist, and I'll put the link in the show notes here. But we're going into this and much more in that program, which is the next level for you once you've left within that first year. So a quick recap is protecting yourself from getting into toxic situations in the future is to take it really slow, be very intentional with entering a new relationship, remembering that it takes time to see patterns, that we don't need to be jumping into commitments and moving in together, no making financial commitments or big decisions that you can't easily walk away from. It's having your core boundaries and deal breakers all clearly defined. And then you also need to observe, watch how they treat you. Is it consistent? Does it ebb and flow? Is it up and down? Are they consistent? So some final thoughts around this is that we need to take some self-ownership for the patterns and repeated occurrences that we have in our lives to find out what's going on within us that is creating the same external conditions, relationships, and issues. If we keep looking external as the cause, then we don't get to the root of the issues, and we will keep repeating those patterns over and over. You've probably heard the saying that anything that is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. I think it was Carl Jung that said that. Can't be positive, but that is what it literally is if we don't clean up what's going on inside of us, it's going to keep being shown to us on the external with repeated patterns and relationships and issues coming up. If we keep pointing the finger, we're giving our power away and we're not taking ownership over our lives. So that wraps up this episode. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I'll chat with you again soon. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Awakening Women podcast. If you love this show and it has served you and helped you on your journey, please take a moment right now and leave a rating and review in iTunes and Spotify. If you'd like more daily content, videos, and inspiration, come on over and join me at Awakening Women Support Official over on Instagram, where we can connect and you can continue your transformation and growth journey. And I'll see you online. Take care.